Hi everyone, this video is all about the histology I require my students to know for the integument system. So let's go ahead and get started with an overview. So for the integument system, it's important to note that there are various layers, right? We're kind of combining all of the histology videos and we're going to talk about what we have here. So I like to break things down as if it's cake because that's just who I am. I love cake, I love sweets, so it's easier to relate it to something in order to remember. So this top purple, I'm going to refer to that as the frosting, and then we have that first layer of cake and that second layer of cake down at the bottom. And you might think to yourself, what? Why are there two layers? Well, because if there's only one layer of a cake, it's a cupcake, okay? Don't cheat yourself. If you want to have cake, go in, get at least two layers. So this purple frosting that I just told you about, this is actually the epidermis. And the epidermis consists of that stratified, squamous, keratinized epithelium. So you see again a bunch of purple up at the top and it kind of shreds away because it's keratinized. Coming down in here, we have that dense, irregular connective tissue. This is what tells you that you are now in the dermis. Now, this top part right here is going to be the papillary layer. And as we go down, this is going to be the reticular layer. And both of those compose that dermis. So you have the epidermis, you have the dermis, and the dermis can be broken down into what's touching the epidermis, which is the papillary layer, and what's down here, which is the reticular layer. Down at the bottom where you start to find the fat cells or the adipose tissue, that's the hypodermis or the subcutaneous layer, which actually isn't a part of the integument system. It just connects the integument to the next organ. Now, what we have here, that indicates where hair is going to grow and push out. Now, do you see these little bubbly structures right here? They kind of look like a sack of fish eggs to me. These little bubbly structures, that is actually a sebaceous gland. Those are the glands that secrete oil onto the hair follicle. So when it comes out, it's nice and lubricated and it helps to protect your hair against microorganismal growth. So these are sebaceous glands right here. These are the hair follicles that will grow out. You have the epidermis, dermis, papillary layer, reticular layer. As you can see, the purple's going down right into these little ridges, and those are the epidermal ridges. And the part of the papillary that goes up, those are called dermal papillae. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next slide. So right here, again, you can see these sebaceous glands that are attached to the hair. This is where hair would be coming out. The sebaceous gland you'll always find right next to the hair follicle, so that's very easy. You can also see that adipose tissue right here that I was telling you about. So this would be a part of that subcutaneous or hypodermis layer. You see these weird little structures right here. These are actually those eccrine and apocrine glands. So those are sweat glands that you find. Do you see this little pink river? It's like a structure with purpose and it comes off of that hair follicle. So this is the hair follicle right here and it's coming off of that. This is an Erector Pili muscle. The Erector Pili muscle is what actually pulls on the hair, smooth muscle that pulls on the hair to allow it to stand up when you have things like goosebumps and it gets too cold. So again, random sack of fish eggs connected to the hair, sebaceous gland. Nice pink brush stroke coming across Erector Pili. Random little squigglies, they look like little tubes, right? That simple cuboidal. Those are going to be those sweat glands, those eccrine and apocrine sweat glands. And again, fat tissue or adipose for that subcutaneous layer. Now we can actually zoom in and see the hair follicle down here. So that is the part of the hair follicle, the part of the hair that is alive, so the organ. And then the hair is actually dead. And the hair is going to push up towards that epidermis and break through that surface. So here we can see the hair papillae, okay? That hair follicle, very nice right here. Okay, and you can see the hair texture that's coming up. So this is a nice histology slide indicating that hair follicle down at the bottom, the hair papillae, and how it's going to push through. Now, this is a great slide that just indicates where you have the eccrine and the apocrine glands, so the sweat glands. You can just see that there's a bunch of sweat glands surrounded here. And that's going to be different from the sebaceous glands because the sebaceous glands, again, are going to be attached to the hair follicle. So that's how you know the difference between the sweat glands and the sebaceous glands. Is it attached to a hair follicle? No, then it must be a sweat gland. Now, another thing I want to show you is look at these layers of the epidermis right here. This, how it looks like these different colors. We're getting to like these pretty mermaid colors. This actually is thick skin. So when we look at thick skin, we can actually start to label some of that strata. Okay, so I want to do that with this last image right here. So not focusing on this connective tissue down here, but focusing on from this dark purple up, we have the different strata, okay? So the top layer that we have here is Stratum Corneum. Okay, Stratum Corneum is going to go from here to here. And again, this is thick skin. And we know it's thick because just look how thick this epidermis is, okay? How many layers there are, 30 plus layers. So this is the Strata Corneum right here. And then we have the Strata Lucidum. Strata Lucidum is going to be a thin layer in between where this kind of translucent blue ends and this dark purple begins. So it's just a thin layer right above this dark purple. Now, if you see this darker blue, darker purple, and how it's different from right here in color, okay, go ahead and get real close to your screen. You're like, I don't see it. I'm going to turn all of you into interior design people, okay? So this darker purple here compared to this lighter bluish purple here. This dark one here is actually Stratum Granulosum, okay? Stratum Granulosum. So all the way here we see Stratum Granulosum. Now, this texture right here is going to be Stratum Spinosum, okay? So Stratum Spinosum is where it looks less compact, less tight, less dense, and a slightly lighter shade of what we're seeing in the Stratum Lucidum. Stratum Granulosum. So right here is going to be that Stratum Spinosum. And then at the very bottom, we have Stratum Basale. And Stratum Basale, I think basement, so it's at the bottom. So it's that very bottom layer that's touching this connective tissue right here. Now you might be wondering, what are these little holes right here? And these holes are actually these excretory ducts of the sweat gland. So it's how it's releasing the sweat to go towards the surface. So we can see them all over. So this person must have been sweating. So these are the different layers. Stratum Corneum, Stratum Lucidum, very thin, translucent layer we only find in thick skin. Stratum Granulosum, this darker layer where it gets a shade lighter, Stratum Spinosum, and Stratum Basale down at the very bottom. How do I remember this? Well, for those of you who are over 21, Corneum, Lucidum, Granulosum, Spinosum, Basale, well, I think to myself, come, let's get some beer. Okay, so if you are under 21, I have one for you too. Come, let's get some boba. I actually prefer boba, so that's the one I use. Come, let's get some boba. Okay, so that's one way that you can remember the different layers or the different strata that we have in our thick skin. And that's it. I hope that this helped you to understand the integument histology.